Gotcha.
Welcome to Molly's, Traveling Molly's. It's good to have all of you here. I can see some of you. I can't see others of you, but welcome. It's tonight. We have features Kelly Russell Agodon and Sarah Sarai, and I'm here with my co-host Al DeGenova. Al, are you there?
Yeah, I am here. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining Traveling Mollies. This is the May 2024 version of Traveling Mollies. It's great to have you here. As always, we'll start out with our open mic and follow that with our features, then a conversation after that with our features. Um, Usually Nina and I start out the open mic, so nobody else has to go first. So tonight I'm going to start out, but before I do that, I just want to also welcome our two features, Sarah and Kelly. Thanks for being here. Um, I will start us with a poem that I've been because I've been feeling a little blocked or stalled. I've been forcing myself to write in form, which is kind of giving myself an assignment, but I've been decided to start a series of pantoums. So this was this is written after rereading Ellen Ginsberg's Kaddish. I hadn't read it in a long time, and decided to pull it out, and it helped me get going with this pantoum. So it's called "Mother Dies Naked in Her Bed" after Kaddish by Ellen Ginsberg. Breast ladles pour a tired wine over a key left on the window sill. Words of love, anger, and time. In the sunlight, the lock waits still. Over a key left on the window sill, the long pubic beard leaves its shadow in the sunlight. The lock waits still, hanging over sad lips pursed and long. The long pubic beard leaves its shadow, those dulled memories hanging over sad lips pursed and long, the fragrant river of reverie. Those dulled memories, long fingernails manicured and red, the fragrant river of reverie, lying alone in a single bed. Long fingernails manicured and red, tearing at thin gray sheets, lying alone in a single bed, grasping for a story never complete. Tearing at thin gray sheets, the poet's mother still trying to teach, grasping for a story never complete, staring through window, the moon out of reach. The poet's mother still trying to teach, the pencil moves with a blunted tip, staring through a window, the moon out of reach, trying to take another sip. The pencil moves with a blunted tip, words of love, anger, and time, trying to take another sip. Breast ladles pour a sour one. That's that. Thank you.
That is wonderful. Al, a pubic beard.
Well, that was straight out of Ginsberg, so thank you.
I
Thank Alan for that image.
was going to say that didn't really sound like you. Um, in any case, so my background in domestic violence influenced this poem that I'm going to read tonight. This is not any of my clients. It is, once you are dealing with a lot of this, that you start to get these composite dreams, which is what this is, and it's called In Self-Defense. Suffice it to say, heinous things happened. To say more would make it easier to defend, but harder to cover. Or easier to picture, but no kind of picture you want in your head. Trust me. Let's just say the body in the basement had it coming. The fire after, unavoidable. Perhaps we could have avoided it all had we taken the officer's advice, order of protection, deadbolts, etc. I know what you're thinking. What kind of monsters would do such a thing? Trust me, we are neither monsters nor martyrs. Bodies can only live so long in peril. Just this. Wounds need licking, and this, we did what we had to. Legal or not, I have to believe we're on the right side of nature. After the burn, the grass grew back like history, fertile and unkempt. Milkweed wafted on an innocent breeze. Thank you. All right, then. So why don't we start with Sarah Ray. Sarah, it's great to see you after such a while.
It's great to be here. Thank you. Thanks to everybody. You can hear me okay, yeah? Are we good? Okay. All right. So yeah, great to be here with Kelly and Sarah. And thank you, Nina and Al and Bill and everybody else. All right. So this is a change of tone from what we've just heard. This one is called Your Poseidon. Not the bombastic, philandering male deity, but the graceful, ill-fated ocean liner of the early 1970s disaster movie of that same name. You're back in your teenage years. It must be ninth grade, with Karen and Kathy and Alice and Nancy and maybe Debbie. No one is old enough to drive, so one of your mothers chauffeurs you to one of those vintage standalone theaters to see the film everyone at school is talking about. You file through the orange shag carpeted lobby, smelling of burnt oil. Make sure you have plenty of buttered popcorn and junior mints on hand, as there is no way you will want to visit the concession counter midway through this film. You lock your eyes to the screen, hold your breaths as the towering wall of water bears down on the elegant ship on a fateful New Year's Eve, gasping as that beautiful vessel moans, groans, tilts on her side until she's completely upside down, making passengers seated at ballroom tables wail and fall to their deaths in mid-celebration, cracking the golden glass ceiling that is now her floor. You watch Gene Hackman come to the rescue as the rebel Reverend Scott, encouraging a few survivors who will listen to climb up over the huge capsized Christmas tree, barely making it to safety before it too crashes down. You bite your nails and hope they will make it out alive as he starts to lead them through water rising in passageways, smokestacks, and engine rooms up to reach the surface of the sea. You picture yourself as Susan in the movie, the teenager played by Pamela Sue Martin, the one with the shapely legs and the body you crave. Oh, you watch enviously as she ditches her formal skirt early on to reveal stylish pink hot pants underneath, the kind that will never fit your thick, bulky thighs. You note how her lacy white blouse becomes grimy, though fashionably so, during the long journey to the top. You especially covet her shoes. Red strappy sandals with high platform heels and soles. This is the 70s after all. The kind that make your mother scowl. You marvel how she keeps them on throughout, never slipping on the rungs of metal ladders in the smokestack, kicking them deftly as she swims through tunnels and corridors. Ah, Gene Hackman. Still looking buff, trim, and suave enough for a 40-something middle-ager, so much so that you have the hots for him despite the fact he's old enough to be your father. You witness the chemistry between him and Susan, how he holds her when she nearly falls, how he cradles her head to his chest, how she cries out and almost jumps after him when he sacrifices himself to save the others, opening a steaming valve and falling to the fiery water. But it's not the gods who will save you from this life, you now know. Not your long dead parents, not the children you never had, not even Gene Hackman. Those shoes? Maybe. The bright straps, so red, refusing to fade. The heels, the soles, indestructible through relentless decades. You're sure to hang on to them, along with your 70s teenage swag that never liked myths too much anyway, could never keep the stories and characters straight. Yeah, the shoes. all the better for placing them on the undersides of the ship's slippery ladder steps, less curved than her smooth, treacherous upsides, with rough, sharp edges sticking out, so they can easily grab at your thick, thick soles as you keep climbing, climbing, climbing. Thank you. And thanks to the Poseidon Adventure movie and Gene Hackman and Ernest Borgnine and those great, great actors.
Oh, it was great. I want to hear it again, but but not. That would be great. Al, you're with us?
Yes, I'm back. Yeah, I keep having Zoom challenges, but I'm here and I can see everybody. So thank you, Sarah. That was a really nice poem. Next up, Claire, is it Conan or Conin? Did I
It's
say that?
Kunin,
Kunin.
not intuitive at all.
Looks like it should have an umlaut or something on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm so glad to be here. I'm also actually a social worker by training. So Nina, your poem very much resonated with me. And the first poem I'm going to read is from an upcoming book called The Beautiful Keeps Breathing, which will be out this summer. The name of this poem is The Growl. A poet walks into a bakery. She orders the toasted baguette with jam. A social worker glances up from her case notes on the back table, sees the writer choose the spot in the sunlight, open a notebook, grin, cradle her pen. Minutes tick as the poet's hand swims back and forth across the page, baguette abandoned. The sheet of paper glistens with the butter of her words. Meanwhile, the social worker picks at her scone, tries to focus on her task another hour, but longing pools on her tongue, tingles her rib cage, tugs at her gut. The forgotten fruits of her desire shimmer in her mind, quickening her imagination, dissolving impossibilities of dreams. Creative juices pulse through her veins from heart to belly, her long suppressed appetite for pleasure laid bare in the body. Like a grizzly waking to the scent of blueberries, her stomach growls. So I have another short one if there's time.
There's definitely time.
Okay, great. This one also food related. It's called A Recipe for Mercy. Hold the darkness in your hands. Break the blocks of bitterness into tiny pieces. Pour it all into the saucepan. Add milk and sugar. Let it boil. Whisk slowly. Lower the heat. Breathe in and out as the hardness of the heart melts into cocoa. Thank you.
All right, then. I know that if you know Alison Joseph, she's suggested at times doing an all food and recipe reading, which your stuff would definitely qualify for. Let me see. How about Tim Brown, an old friend who I haven't seen in 21 years or so.
There we go. Trying to get my mute turned off. You came and visited New York City soon after I moved here. You did a reading at Cornelia Street Cafe, I remember. So a little less than 21 years. Anyhow, yeah, I'm coming to you live from the Bronx, New York, where amongst other things, I co-host a reading series, Art in the Basin, at Monomore Coffee and Wine. cafe in the Kingsbridge neighborhood. We just celebrated our 7th anniversary actually in April, so we've been doing it a while. We tend to have a featured reader as well as a hybrid open mic. I'll put the Eventbrite link in if you do care to ever check us out. We also live stream on YouTube. I'm going to read a fairly recent poem. It's entitled Model Ship. When I was 6 months old, my father and his in-laws exchanged broadsides in some now forgotten controversy when diplomacy had failed. My mother raised a white flag, ally to both, ally to neither, imprisoned in my father's hold, where she starved in silence. When I was 6 years old, my aunt, a Lutheran deaconess and missionary to Japan, sent me a gift, a ship model wrapped in crinkly, tissuey brown paper that smelled perfumey and unfamiliar. My father helped me build the ship model. He did all the work. A junk complete with wooden hull and cloth sails strung with elaborate rigging. Displayed with honor on my dresser in my bedroom, it began to gnaw at my father. He already carried from boyhood memories of Japanese perfidy during the war, Pearl Harbor, Bataan. Now he was reminded of my aunt's perceived perfidy. My father made me give away the model ship, a donation under duress to my grade school. To this day, I ask his shade why and never receive a good answer. Except he was a Navy man, Korean War, a machinist mate first class, but I imagine him more a chief petty officer. We're to honor our veterans, they say, even the pettiest. It was her sister, her blood, yet my mother raised the white flag, ally to both, ally to neither, imprisoned in my father's hold, where she starved in silence. Thanks, everyone.
Tim, do you have another one for us?
I hadn't really prepared one. No, sorry. I was just going to make sure I was going to be within the limits. So another
Well,
time.
we appreciate that. Let's see who Christine, is it Iredale or Eardale?
It's Iredale.
Welcome.
Thank you. This one's been accepted in the Meadow. It's going to come out here shortly. The title is called Kindness in an Unkind Climate. Low flow toilets, lawn chairs that belong on a beach or at a 4th of July barbecue, fucking sand, and a little convenience store filled with products from around the world. Turkish cigarettes, German chocolate, bottles of non-alcoholic beer. It even had a 7-Eleven sign that fell after one too many sandstorms. We bought bottles of Coke there for the master sergeant who gave my twin sister and me a package of smoked salmon, how we gobbled it up, how we smoked cigarettes at all hours of the night. After all, it was his second deployment. He could never sleep. He told me he had a degree in theology but didn't believe in God. Sometimes I would need to use the latrine in the middle of the night. He would be out there smoking his cigarettes. When I returned, he'd still be standing outside his chew. He was a quiet man, and we were quiet. We would say goodnight and close our doors. This one's more recent. I've just started submitting it. The title for this one is Confessions of a War Poet. The war stories always depict the men coming home one way or another, but never what happens after. And I would be lying if I told you I know how this story ends. I've always had a thing for happy endings, and I keep searching for them. Maybe it will come in the form of a man with kind brown eyes and a warm smile. Maybe in knowing things can always be worse. Maybe my happy ending is putting down these words, writing, look, I've survived so far. In college, I heard a journalist talk about the soldiers he interviewed from the Idaho National Guard. For a split second, I thought about leaving, but instead stuffed my fist in my mouth to hold back the sobs. Because while my pain is temporary, theirs is gone. I've walked Arlington Cemetery and wondered why I survived and still watch as peers drop like flies from drugs and suicide. Does the thought of a bullet ever go away? The smell of smoke burn pits. The sand in a storm is the sand on a beach. Remember, you always have to come back to shore. Thank you.
Wow, we have got some interesting common threads running through these poems. It turns out that a couple of people were not able to make it to the open mic tonight, so which is why I've been kind of letting you guys know that if you want to read another poem, and there still will be time for that, when we finish the first round, just wave and we'll get you back. But for now, let's see. How about Pablo Adavalo?
Hi, everybody. I wanted to lift up another voice, and so I wanted to read a poem that's been in my head a bunch. So this is by Palestinian poet Ibrahim Nasrallah. It was from March 24th. It's called Palestinian. I was silent and nothing came of it. I spoke and nothing came of it. I cursed, I apologized, and nothing came of it. I was busy, I pretended to be busy, and nothing. I sat, I walked, I ran, I shivered and I warmed up, nothing. I was parched until I cracked. I drank until I drowned, and nothing came of it. I crumbled like a fetus, like the father, the siblings, and the mother. I was then gathered in a shroud and made of old curtains, and nothing came of it. I stumbled more than I could stand, and then I stood up, and nothing came of it. I prayed until, like a prophet, I became a verse in a holy book. I rode until I reached hell. I beseeched and begged, and nothing. I raged, I calmed. I remembered what was once distant, and I forgot what was once close. I befriended a monster. I fought a monster. I died young and sometimes survived. In both times, I grew old from all that I had seen, but nothing came of it. I charged, I withdrew, I fought the wind when it blew, I reconciled with the waves when I rose and raged. Among the horses, my heart was a horse. In the night, my heart was of night, and nothing came of it. I ate, I hungered, I vomited, and nothing came of it. I embraced my shadow, and I chastised it, and then I chastised myself. I greeted a woman lost in the streets. I fought with a man and his smile nearby, and with a bird that sang briefly in the garden, and nothing came of it. I closed all the windows in my house and opened them. I wrote words on death when it was merciful, death when it was futile, death when it was hell, death when it was the only way at last, death when it was gentle and light, death when it was heavy and dark, and nothing came of it. I wrote about the river and the sea and tomorrow and the sun, and nothing came of it. I wrote about oppression and depravity, purity too. I slept without a bite of bread. I dreamt without dreams. I woke up not missing my hands or feet or the reflection in the mirror or the thing I call my soul. I died and I lived. I lit myself on fire. I put myself out with my own ashes, and nothing came of it. All these elements, oh God, fire, earth, wind, and water, their fifth is a pain that blind songs can't see. Their sixth is this immense loneliness, and their seventh, since my slaughter, is blood. When I burned, I inhabited the letters of my free name like a butterfly, Palestine. When my roof was suddenly blown off into the sky, and with it a wall, a window, and the youngest of my children, I gathered myself in the G and the A and the Z and the A, and I became Gaza. 1,000 warplanes circled and hit me. I collapsed and collapsed again, and then rose in a scream. I called out, but nothing came of it. I apologized, and nothing came of it. Nothing came of it. I lost faith and believed, lost faith and believed again, and lost faith, and nothing came of it. Nothing came of it. And the world asked me, all this, what of it?
Wow. Actually, Marissa's asking the same thing that I was about to ask you, which is, would you put the name of the poem and the author, and if there's a link to it, that would be great also. And if Bill, if you would, if you're able to put it in the YouTube chat. That is a poem that I think should have been or could have been written before, but God bless him. He wrote it.
Yeah. Thank you,
So,
Pablo.
yeah,
Pablo, do you have
so-
anything else?
yeah, let's hear your stuff.
Oh, okay. I did prepare something. A lot of us were watching the sky a couple of days, so I wrote this about. It's called The Hunt. Across the northern sky, beneath the handle of the Little Dipper, Ursa Minor, the bear cub, a cut of light divides a moment, then is gone, then remains. Its after image a fading scar. Against the insistent blue-black, distant traffic across the east-west interstate fades into the hum of power lines, which itself fades, and the quiet fills your mouth. A scrap of interstellar debris incinerated by the upper atmosphere, memorialized by synaptic circuits retracing their steps. Look back, past the field of switchgrass, the lone porch light on the rehab farmhouse, the silhouetted oaks, hickories edging the Vermilion River, straight into the dark. Let your eyes adjust, then look up at no one part of the sky. Slowly your gaze ripples the light, the air heavy with sumac, a dart in your periphery, compelled by gravity to burn.
Well, thank you, Pablo. Very nice.
Al,
Do
are
you
you-
have another? Pablo, do you have another?
If you guys want another, I have another.
Go for it.
Yeah, okay. So this is called The Sound. The sound beneath high tension power lines, like swarms of electric wasps, like aluminum foil against your molars, milkweed, cowslip, prairie phlox, primrose, clover, and crocus condense at the edge of wildgrass as evening slips of light through branches of oaks tint mandarin, evenly spaced houses curling into cul-de-sacs. Even as the permanent dawn of distant cities upholds the stubborn conviction of standing still beneath shifting stars, even as the power plant furloughs night staff despite demand, even as dropouts down whippets and hurl empties into the street, even as your belly aches, the hum cradles your body to electric sleep.
Thank you, Pablo. Good to see you. Let's see. I'm a little Zoom challenged tonight for whatever reason, but it looks to me like one more on our open mic. is Marissa Clark. And we have time for probably, if anybody wanted to do another one, just let us know. Just kind of, I don't know, raise your hand or whatever. So Marissa Clark, what do you got?
Hi, everyone. It's pronounced Marisa. I'm coming to you from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Very happy to be here. And I found out about this through Kelly posting. So I'm always appreciative of opportunities to build poetry community. And glad to be here. And I hope you're all having a nice evening. I just had my first book come out. It's called Bird. And I'm going to read a poem from that. And it is called Pants, an autobiography. 1. The Christmas I was 5, I got my first pair of zippered pants, stitched cowboy style, cobalt blue, a sky blue shirt to match. I tugged them on and ran, excited, to the bathroom. I stood before the toilet and unzipped. The pee would not come. The key was not the zipper. 2. Every year, year in, year out, my grandmother frowned and warned, if you don't start wearing dresses, your legs are going to take the shape of pants. Did she think my legs might bell-bottom one year, peg the next, obey fashion's fickle dictates? Or was she looking past the pants and legs at the unladylike slice of space where they didn't meet, the absence between these two shapely but odd-shaped parentheses, the nothing they enclosed, the emptiness? She frowned at nothing, no thing, at what I lacked, not what I had. 3. A favorite high school teacher signed my senior yearbook. Try to please your mother. Wear a dress now and then. Her advice was overthrown on graduation day when a local pop DJ dedicated Forever in Blue Jeans to St. Martin's graduating class. I was speeding down the beach highway, salt air ripping in through open windows. I cranked the volume and sang, top of my lungs, I'd much rather be. Neil Diamond's old uncool song, my new anthem. I felt vindicated, free. 4. Now for a partial resume of my accomplishments in pants. I received my higher education entirely in pants. 3 degrees, 2 in English, the first in psychology. In pants, I shelved library magazines, ran errands for a law firm, and typed mailing labels for the local Catholic church. In pants, I sold books at Borders in Atlanta and wished the customers a good day. I designed ads and proofread copy for 2 typography and graphics shops, always in pants. The Centers for Disease Control employed me 7 years and several months to put on pants and provide research documents to medical professionals and scientific types. Currently, I wear pants to teach college English, creative writing, comp, queer lit. 5. Last time I wore a dress was 1996, Halloween to be exact. I dressed as Patsy Stone of Ab Fab fame, a leggy, chain-smoking, stolly-slugging, middle-aged, sex always on the brain drag queen's dream. To complete the transformation, I caked makeup on my face, spun the long strands of a platinum blonde wig into a high-piled swirl, and donned sheer black hose, high heels, a silk blouse, and a black pencil skirt, all borrowed. At the costume party, no one recognized me. But when she saw the photos from that night, my mother said how beautiful I looked. Need I say more about what a drag it is for me to wear a dress? Thank you.
Brilliant. Well, it does make me wonder who, if people under the age of 45 know that we couldn't wear pants back in the day, that the dress codes did not allow for it. Actually, if you're on YouTube and under 45 and you don't or do know that that was the case, drop us a line, just drop a yes or no. And by the way, one of our features, Kelly blurbed your book and says it's wonderful here in the chat. So, and you just wrote, Kelly wrote, Mary Tyler Moore wearing pants on her show caused a big stir. And yes, I sure did. Well, we've got time for these couple of other poets, and actually might start with Bill Harrison, who says he can read something and did not read in the open mic.
I know how to read.
You do?
I'll prove it.
Yep. Sounds good. Let's see.
This is a poem for Yom Kippur 2024. When it's all said and done, there'll be a chicken in every pyre and a turkey carcass in every coffin. Kafiyas and kippahs, birds of a feather, will flock together, done and done. And the swallows will come back to Jerusalem. Forgive and forget? It's just not done. Who'll be in their Shiva finest when the silos are empty and the deeds are done? The eagle flies on Friday. Saturday I go out and pray. Apologize, or the eagles will come and pull out your eyes, and you'll be done for. Are we done yet? Lord, no. A wake of vultures feeding in the desert, no sooner dead than done. When the dead ducks float downstream, will we ask, what have we done? Or will the survivors crow, excellent, well done, sir. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Bill. You're a newly become poet. That was great.
Don't get used to it.
Let's see. Tim, you said you had one more for us.
I do. I have a short one. One of the things that Art in the Basin does besides host readings is we also host for the past 3 or 4 years online workshops. And a recent one, kind of going back to Nina's reference to Allison Joseph, who's a fabulous poet, by the way, who grew up in the Bronx. We did a workshop on food themes, poetry and food, by Sarah Stern, a fairly widely published poet here in this corner of the Bronx. Anyway, this was written for that workshop. It's called Pear Hatred. It's short. My mother hated pears. It stems from, I understand, her mother plopping a tablespoon of cottage cheese into the hollow of a canned Bartlett half and calling it dessert. How could they, my mother and grandmother, hate pears?
Great. And we have, I keep waiting for more of that, Tim. But no cottage cheese. Please. Okay, so let's see. Sarah, Ray, did you say that you can do another one? Good. Let's hear it.
Okay, so this was inspired by the recent eclipse that we've had. And I traveled to southern Indiana to see it near where my mother was born. So that was a pretty cool experience. After totality. It is only safe to remove your eclipse glasses during what's known as totality, the brief period of time when the moon is completely blocking the sun. NASA. It's so short, that time the sun gives over completely to dance with the moon, lets herself be calmed and led, her rays softened, her force quieted. We feel the air temperature dropping, the lightness fading, animals and plants readying themselves for slumber. Streetlights come on. We linger in the pause, feel our breath, the air flowing in. Our eyes, unveiled now, gaze at the sun-shadowed orb, her white-lit ring, pure and unadulterated. We celebrate. And soon, we know she will reassert herself, will regain her girth. Her luminous power will grow crescent by crescent. We have to cover our eyes again. By day's end, they are all gone. The vendors, the musicians, the celebrities, the NASA scientists, the news anchors flown in. Hotels readjust their prices, signs advertising eclipse parking for $20, $30, $40 have all disappeared. The highways are not crowded now. The cosmos surrounds me. I drive north, stilled by this moment, the moment when I no longer need my special glasses, when I can stand in the cool shade, the quiet calm, the moment when I can lift my naked face to the heavens and look. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right. We'll try and squeeze in another one before our features. Christine, you had raised your hand.
Yes, I'm gonna read a poem I actually wrote during one of Kelly's workshops. The title is Maybe Next Time. All shit is brown in Yakima, like the one time that Sergeant First Class asked if you were wearing lipstick. Yeah, like there's someone here that I would like to impress. Cold winds always leave my cheeks and lips bright red, skin pale like death. Yeah, if there's anyone I'd like to impress, it's death. We brushed past each other a few times in the hallway, born not breathing, those mortars in Missoula, and we mustn't forget the VBAD. Maybe next time I'll have the courage to press my body up against his, plant a kiss on his lips, take him back to my room, or hell, go back to his. It would be our little secret. Just let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. I saw a turtle crossing the street as I was driving on a country road. It made me think of John Steinbeck's novel, The Grapes of Wrath. Maybe I should have stopped to save it instead of driving by listening to Johnny Cash's I Walk the Line. Death is always so much cooler and less messy on television. Although I see mountains and ocean, I still dream of desert and hear the hum of airplanes. Thank you.
Wow. You know, and I was being taught in junior high school, The Grapes of Wrath. The teacher spent an incredible amount of time talking about that turtle, and at the time I just thought that was so boring. But it's great when you're grown up. There was one other person, and that's Claire. Claire, you want to give us one more?
Yeah. This is called Salt and Light at the LGBTQ plus Night of Healing in the Bible Belt. It's dedicated to Reverend Nicole Garcia. Preaching the message mighty as the Sermon on the Mount, you save us from fear of brimstone, sin, the hypocrite with the plank in his eye. You, the peacemaker at the pulpit, poised in your Lutheran collar and glory, teach mercy to the crowd of allies, atheists, and bodies battered by Bibles, state legislatures, wolves claiming sheep clothing. You, the trans prophetess, gazing over the sea of queer radiance, pour out salt and light, exhaling the breath of life. You speak the good news since the beginning of time. If you want to see the image of God, look in the mirror. Thanks.
Wow. So before we go to the features, and we're all ready for that, do you have anything you want to add, Al? You're muted. You're muted.
I thoroughly enjoyed our open mic tonight. Thank you, everybody, and thanks for us doing a second round. I just posted in the chat, and I was about to post on YouTube that we always like to show our appreciation to our features by passing the virtual hat. And when we did this in the real world, we would pass a actual hat and then share that with our features. So I just put a link into the chat, and you know, it's actually a donation link connected to the journal that I published. So where, you know, when it says After Hours Press, don't be afraid that the whatever you feel you can donate for our features gets split evenly between them. So and that's about it. So I think it's time for a feature, Nina.
All right. All right. Well, we have a change in order. Sarai lost her her Wi-Fi, so we're going to start with you, Kelly. We're just really having a screwed up tech night, but we are we're getting through. So, Kelly. Kelly Russell Agodon is a bi-queer poet, writer, and editor from the Pacific Northwest. Her newest books are Dialogues with Rising Tides and Copper Canyon, which was named a finalist in the Washington State Book Awards and shortlisted for the Eric Hoffer Book Award Grand Prize in Poetry, and Demystifying the Manuscript, Essays and Interviews on Creating a Book of Poems, co-edited with Susan Rich. Her writing has appeared in places like O, the Oprah magazine, NPR, The Atlantic, HuffPost, Forbes magazine, The Rumpus, American Poetry Review, and Harvard Review. She teaches at Pacific Lutheran University's low-res MFA program and Rainier Writing Workshop. And she's also the co-host of the poetry series Poems You Need with Melissa Studdard. And well, I'll ask you that later, and I'm looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you, Nina. And everyone can hear me okay? Thank you, readers, for kicking off the night with so much energy and good poems and good words. And it was really wonderful to hear Christine read a poem from one of our workshops, because that's what I do at Two Sylvias right now. I'll throw this into the link. I write weekly prompts for our weekly muse and host our Zoom series there. So it's always nice when a poem goes out into the world from that. So I'm going to set my timer. And I will be reading from, this is a very old copy, but Dialogues with Rising Tides. I'm going to read 5 or 6 poems tonight. And I'm going to read from my manuscript and process. So some new work, which always is a little risky, but I always feel like as poets and writers in the world and readers in the world, we have to take risks. So I'm going to start with the first poem in my book. And I always believe the first poem is kind of a handshake to the reader, where you're kind of offering them some information about your book. It can almost be a key to your book. And what I think this poem offers is that I have a dark sense of humor. And so it's almost like if you pass this test and like this poem, you might want to go on and read the rest. And I just learned this poem is getting featured on the Slowdown with Major Jackson. So I am just like, check, bucket list. So I was just thrilled to get that news. I've always wanted to be chosen. And this poem's called Hunger. Hunger. If we never have enough love, we have more than most. We have lost dogs in the neighborhood and wild coyotes. And sometimes we can't tell them apart. Sometimes we don't want to. Once I brought home a coyote and told my lover that we had a new pet until it ate our chickens, our ducks, and our cat. Sometimes we make mistakes and call them coincidences. We hold open the door, then wonder how the stranger ended up in our home. There is a woman on our block who thinks she's feeding bunnies, but they are large rats without tails. Remember the farmer's wife? Remember the carving knife? We are all trying to change what we fear into something beautiful. But even rats need to eat. Even rats and coyotes, and the bones on the trail could be the bones on our plate. I ordered Cornish hen. I ordered duck. Sometimes love hurts. Sometimes the lost dog doesn't need to be found. I also like to say that no animals were injured when writing that poem. That was all from my imagination. I think I'm going to read this weird little poem here. If I can find it. Here it is. This is another, I don't know, I think this is an anxiety poem, but somehow my family got a hold of this poem and they read it. I don't think it got passed around on the internet or something. And my niece said she didn't want to sit next to me at Thanksgiving because it had to do with knives. And you'll understand that. But that is like when you are in a family where they are not poets, they think you're cuckoo. So this one's called At Times My Body Leans Towards Loss. You didn't remember seeing the deer give birth on the highway. So when I said, I worry about things I can't control, you told me the pitchfork I carry in my mind stabs inward. Like the day was sun-filled, but what I saw was how I bumped the planter of Gerber daisies, and the moth fluttered up into the beak of a bird. Death and dinner. A minor accident and something dies. Like the woman who drove to work in her car, crying. When I saw her, she waved, a reflection in the glass, the good fortune of having a job to drive to, but the collision of sadness in the left ventricle of her heart. Who can hold a knife without thinking for just a second which vein is the most useful to slice into? Most everyone, you say, as you dull down the ends of my pitchfork. Most everyone, you say, as you unlock the door to our home. I think art needs to be a place to put the thoughts that you have that maybe you don't want to say out loud. Because I think other people sometimes have those thoughts and feel less alone, which is usually what I'm writing towards, is that idea for people to feel less alone. I think I'm going to jump to some new work because that feels good right now. And I do think this next.
Wait, I do want to say that I'm hearing from Sarah that she has lost Wi-Fi. I think I mentioned that, but I'm trying to see if we can find her back. But in the meantime, please read a little more, and then it'll just be you and I having a good conversation unless we get her back. Okay?
Sounds perfect. It has been a crazy evening with all of the events. And I saw someone wrote, I think it was Marisa, about like the Aurora Borealis, like the Northern Lights. Let's just blame it on the beauty of the world we all just saw.
Well, you know, they do say, they have been saying that the sunstorms have been interfering with all kinds of electrical and technical.
I believe it. I actually believe it also interferes with my the way I feel I mean, I believe I'm a direct source, not source, but I always feel like I'm feeling the storm. That is probably just a highly sensitive person thing to say. All right, so here's some new work. This new collection, and it's a manuscript in progress. It's called Accidental Devotions, and it deals a lot with desire. I think it's one of my, it's kind of an upbeat book. I don't know. There's love and desire and relationships, anxiety, all sorts of things in there. So I'm going to read some poems from that. Okay. Here's the first one, and a shout out to Susan Rich, who helped me come up with a title for it. It's called Why Not Shorten Our Lives with Splendor? And there's really nothing to know except that in one of our communities, they had painted a labyrinth in a parking lot. And there was also, the hotel I was staying at also had warm cookies at 5 p.m. And that created a little conflict for me. It's called Why Not Shorten Our Lives with Splendor? Once I loved a Buddhist with a stubborn heart. And when she brought me just picked sunflowers, I said how we would watch them die together on the coffee table next to the candle named Devotion. It's funny what we try to keep alive, how we pick beauty and bring it inside, giving it its best home. We have a large face, a little water, knowing we've shortened its life with our desire for splendor. Once she and I walked a parking lot labyrinth, holding hands after a poetry reading, and how upset she was when once in the middle I let go and skipped over the lines to break free. I understood what she was saying. Long way in, long way out. It was a meditation together. But I wanted to return to our hotel, knowing warm chocolate chip cookies were waiting at the front desk. What makes us harder to love? The stubbornness of one way or the flightiness of not respecting the rules? There is never a right answer about leaving or sunflowers, but sometimes in autumn, I return to the field without her to see their yellow faces like all the humans I didn't love well enough, standing tall in a field, my carelessness, unlike the sun, the one thing that doesn't warm them. Okay. So this next poem is about typos. I mean, I'm a very muscle memory person. And so if I type a word a lot, it just, like, I can't type pottery barn. It always comes out poetry barn. But this is this is called the patron saint of typos. And this was a typo I sent. And I've sent several times where I try to write good, but don't get the double O, and I end up sending God to people just randomly. It's called Patron Saint of Typos. Because one O slipped away, so good became so God, a halo slipping off an angel as she climbed through a bedroom window. We move closer together. Because I rushed an email, that's very God for you. My fingers offered a deity, sent a bouquet of the holy blessings instead of encouragement. Very God, I texted my kid, the divine floating through them as if I had forgotten brief moments of prayer carried over Wi-Fi. Who thought we were atheists bowing to our calendars, worshiping our phones? We were sharing inadvertent blessings through the interwebs in light of another Earthrise before we surrendered our pulse. Okay. And maybe I'll read 2 more, and that'll get me to my 6. Okay, I'm going to flip back because I have the poem I want to end on, which I think is this funny thing, just to know you want to end on a poem. Since there's people in New York, I'm going to read this poem because it has a bodega in it and we don't have them here. And it's called Light Vessel, and it's from Dialogues with Rising Tides, and it's the poem that has the title hidden in it. I think that's about it. Light Vessel. Tonight, under an unkissed moon, the recipe is disappearing. A dialogue with rising tides and a light ship crashing against a blue shore of healing. When I struggle in a diorama of traffic, I become the silver orb in a city's pinball machine. Be here now, flung against the pulsing lights and hectic newspaper that paper mache themselves to my legs, my life. I forget it's been years since I've seen neon flicker. Only now, the only language I speak is seascape, a searchlight, a map made of unintelligible emotions I try to navigate. If I could be any age, I'd be the heartbeat just before the butter melts, where everything is soft and easy, a cookbook for a sacred life. And when I'm desperate for spices, I go to the bodega to buy love. But the owner gives me wine and a new pen, says, this is probably better. And how can I argue? I've forgotten to pack a lunch, forgotten how much I ache for anyone to rest their words against my lips. Thank you. And I will end with this poem that has an extremely long title. So in this collection, I tried to create a form, and the form was called, it's a made-up form. There's a devotion, and then there's an accidental devotion. And it's that idea of like what we're like, I don't know, what we accidentally fall in love with or bring into our lives, and then also the things that we really love. And this title, here's the long title. The title is Devotion, where after I kiss you in a cemetery, Emily Dickinson comes to me in a dream and says, poetry may be our tombstone, but what an exhilarating epitaph. I'm writing letters to a ghost, licking a stamp called ache. The envelope is what I wear, a long white dress over my hips of blue handwriting. Open me gently and see how owls exit my lungs. Somewhere under a meteor shower, 2 women make love on a gravestone because they didn't die, because they like to haunt the dead and steal their flowers. I admit there are too many lilies in the widow's garden. Dampness places its lip in her soil, on her sunrise. Once we had a marriage and mirage, lies, line breaks, and liabilities. It wears me down to think I have to choose a life. So I dream I don't exist except as wind, as particles or radio waves in the glint of the ozone layer. Tell me something taboo, she says to me as she letter opens my skirt in a world where we don't get to determine the lettering on our tombstones. Our font hasn't been designed yet. Maybe desire is knowing there are no promises. You be the hips, I'll be the night. Thank you.
Kelly, that was gorgeous.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, that was gorgeous. And I have a few questions for you, and we're going to kind of get to it. And in fact, we're gonna wing it because in fact, Sarah is lost in the wasteland of Manhattan. And she sends her apologies that she can't be with us. And which is a shame. We'll have to get her back at some point. But because we're going to have some extra time, I may ask you, and if you have the work available, to maybe read a couple of targeted things, and I'm going to give you some advanced notice. For the audience, well, first off, give Kelly another round of applause. That was just amazing. And if we ask too much, just please let me know. The couple of things I was thinking about in terms of other poems or examples of work are, one, to hear more of a couple more devotions, because that's interesting and it sounds like a form that some of us would like to try out for ourselves. And the other thing is the Mad Libs that you and Melissa have done. And for those of you who were here for Melissa's feature, maybe 2 or 3 months, no, it was probably more than that, but she's just a wonderful poet who, do you remember the name of her last book?
Your Selection Committee.
Right. Another wonderful book. And the two of them have do a couple of things together, but One Day on Facebook, that sounds like a good title. One Day on Facebook. I saw a post and it was a poem that the two of you had written together, right? That was based on a Mad Lib. I don't know if that's what you were calling it, but for those of you who know of Mad Magazine from back in the way back, it actually works really well as a way to create something. So maybe we could start by having you talk about that in particular.
Okay, that was a fun poem to write. So Melissa and I have been collaborating on poems for years now, and we use a Google document that we both have access to. And one of us starts, and then we ask these really what we call surreal questions, which can be like, actually, this is crazy. I have this like old jar, and this is how we used to do it back in the day, is Melissa and I do this also with Marty Solano and Rhonda Broach, is you write down on these questions and then you start asking them. So I believe this is Melissa. Like, one of the questions she asked me was, what is still inside the runner's leg? What does the ocean drink when it's bored with water? What did the painting of the beach say to the oil rig? And that actually ended up in one of my poems. And so we do that. So I will put these strange questions down and she'll respond to it. And then I'll come in and write and then do the same thing. But whoever is writing can revise the other people's work. So I can revise her work, she can revise. So there's a total loss of control, and you have to be not loss of control, but you lose control over you can't get your big ego in there and say, but I really like the word blue and you changed it to purple or whatever. And so Mad Lib came out where I forget how it started, but we wrote a poem and it's a Mad Lib. But a really cool thing has happened is people have used that poem to write their own poems. So I wish I had a link. I could probably find it, but that you can Google Mad Lib, Melissa Studdard, Kelly Russell Agodon, and find it. And that's where that one came about. But we never know what we're going to write. It can be anything.
So with those questions, by the way, it is online, right?
Yes.
So if anybody on Zoom feels like looking it up and reading it to us, please do. But my question is, so those surreal questions that you ask each other, did those become part of the poem, or is it just the responses?
You know, sometimes it becomes part of the poem, like that part about the oil rig ended up in a poem I was writing. Sometimes it doesn't. I mean, they're weird things that we're asking here. I mean, and sometimes they get really crazy. And what is there instead of a uterus that holds a diamond, a heart, body is broken communion wafer? I mean, it's kind of just, it's just this almost just like to influence your brain and to write from that place of the subconscious where you're just kind of trusting what comes out of these weird little questions. And sometimes what will happen is you may only read like one question and then you start writing and that spurs it and you might not need to go to the next one. Because there's been times where she's written me like 5 questions and I've answered like 3 kind of in the poem. And then I've like given the other 2 back to her to answer for her turn to write. So it can work all different ways. But we always allow each other. I mean, you never have to use any of the questions. It's just a way that if you arrive at a piece of paper or a document, that there's some weird little, questions to get you going.
That is very cool. And do you have any of those poems on hand that you could share?
Well, I wish yes, I probably do. The one where I read about the oil rig, where I said, what did the painting of the beach say to the oil rig? That definitely ended up in one of my poems. Do you want to hear that one?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll pull that one up. All right, let me do it. Let's see. It's like the nervous when you're like, oh no, I'm online and trying to find something. I might not be able to find it. It's like when you're trying to Google oil rig. Like, I can't find it. I can't find it.
All right.
I have enough poems that have that in there. So
Yes. Well,
I can read a devotion though, if you want one of those.
yeah, give us another devotion. Then I want to ask you a little bit about that form.
Okay, so here's an accidental devotion, and maybe this will kind of help explain what it's about. But when you all of a sudden realize there's something in your life that you're either obsessed with or it's meaningful to you, and it can be good or bad. And this is kind of an example of a not so great one. It's called Accidental Devotion to a Smartphone. Oh, and basically what an accidental devotion, the form is 4-line stanzas with the 3rd and 4th line indented 5 spaces. That's what it looks like on the page. Accidental devotion to a smartphone. On the ferry, I overhear a man tell his cell phone that he wants to stay married, that they can make this right. There's a sunset, the color of plums, a few kernels of popcorn on the floor. The man wants his cell phone to know he's sorry. He understands he fucked up, can do better. As he talks, I think about how this morning, instead of writing poems, I sat on a beach watching 2 otters run across the shore and dive into the waves together, almost synchronized. I imagined them texting each other love notes on clamshells. The man holds his phone like a friend he's trying not to lose. And I wish he'd just toss it over the boat when our ferry docks and walk out into the wet sand to find a shell to give to the person he fears he'll never get another chance to love.
Wow. Love that. I love that. Now that's the accidental devotion.
Yeah, you like accidentally putting your phone as your most important thing in your life. You know, that's our phones are such this. I have such a like love-hate relationship with my phone. It's not even funny. So mine's always with the sound off and on focus, but it's still a distraction. And so anyway, so that would be an accidental one where he's accidentally put something else before his partner.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so tell me about the non-accidental devotions.
So those are 5-line stanzas, and the last 3 lines are indented 5. And those are much more, I feel like more relationship, more not like, oh, I've accidentally got this thing in my life, or how did this happen? They're much more focused on something real. And I'm still like learning about this. So, you know, because when you write a book of poems, you have to like, your poems have to teach you something. And so this collection, I'm continually learning about it. Well, this manuscript, it's not a collection yet. I'm learning about this manuscript, about what I'm doing. And so it's still a little muddy for me to try to kind of figure out what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But I continue to learn about it with each new revision.
So this devotion or devotional, as it were, as it might be, is that something that you have been influenced by other poets who are doing something similar?
I wish I could say yes to that. No, this is just some kooky. This is my kooky brain deciding. When I work on, I haven't really worked on a book this way for a long time. I think Hourglass Museum was a book that I really wanted to be a paper museum. So each of the sections are like exhibits. Like there's one called like nudes, and that section has no punctuation, because I tried to figure out, well, what would a poem that would be nude, what would that look like? And so this is kind of that same idea. I still feel like I need to write one more poem, like the opposite of an accidental devotion, like an intentional prayer or something. So I'm working on that.
Which would be different from the regular devotional?
It would be something completely different. It would just live in that space between the two places, because I thought, well, if you can be accidentally devoted, what about if you're in, you know, what's an intentional prayer? So I don't know. When I'm working on a manuscript, I almost feel like I go a little, you know, Beautiful Mind. Do you know that scene in Beautiful Mind, like where he's got the Post-its all over this and there's string everywhere, and he's like, it all makes sense. I mean, I feel like I get so deep into my manuscript. Tim Gunn has I used to watch Project Runway, and there was this designer who was making a coat out of human hair. And Tim Gunn went to see him. He's one of my favorite people. And he was horrified that he had this human hair jacket. And he said to him, I think you're in the monkey house. And the designer said, what do you mean? And he said, you know, when you go into the monkey house, it smells really, really bad. And then you're there for like 5 minutes, it smells, you know, better. And then you're there for like 20 minutes and you're not really smelling it at all. And then he says to the designer, you're in the monkey house. And I think for me, that's my biggest worry when I'm creating a manuscript, that I'm not so far gone into the monkey house that I'm actually writing good poems and not really bad, really making it very Beautiful Mindish. So we'll see. I mean, you don't really know. I don't.
So are you saying that you're worried that you've been in the monkey house so long that you have acclimatized and you can no longer smell it and it's terrible? Or
yeah, don't you feel that way sometime with your own work? Is that I get so engrossed in my work and creating a manuscript. And now when you're creating it, I think about the reader all the time and what am I trying to say? but you get into almost that like obsessive, that devotional place, you know, and you're just devoted to the manuscript and trying to make it better. But I do often have that like Tim Gunn moment in the monkey house, like spinning in my head, like, are you in the monkey house? Like maybe take a step back, get some space, return to it. So, because sometimes I feel like I think it's making sense. And I don't know if you've ever done this. Have you ever gone back to an old poem you've written and then like wondered like what the hell is going on? Has like I have gone back to some of my work and went, huh, I wrote this. I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Huh. I don't know. I'll have to think about that. What's more common is for me to think to myself, oh, I was writing that and it was other people heard it or read it. But actually similarly, when you talk about working on a collection, that's a collection. I've been working on something for years, which has a plot to it. I guess you'd call it a novel in verse. And I found myself falling so much into the style of writing that it begins to sound like a caricature of itself. And has that ever happened to you?
I know exactly what you're talking about. The thing that happens to me that I'm very, very careful of, and I even noticed it when I was reading, is just a certain, I don't want to say tricks. Let's use the term techniques that you do and you get used to doing, and then you overdo them or you find them in your work. I don't want to keep writing the same poem over and over again. I know we all have our obsessions and things that I will always be returning to. I was realizing tomorrow's my father's birthday, and he died in 1992, and there's a poem in every one of my book about him. He's always going to be in my books, and I'm not going to change that, but I do know that sense of yeah, it's almost like you're ripping yourself off, like you're plagiarizing your own self. And so for a while, when I was a younger poet, I got really into the word moth. And for me, that meant death. And so whenever I needed something very kind of dark, a moth would appear in my poem. And I'm like, oh, you're just bored. I mean, I'm bored with myself with it. So I am constantly trying to push myself to try new things, don't get into habits. But then there are things we do well, and people have a certain voice in the things we love about them. So, it's that making sure something's your signature style and not your costume, I guess would be what it is. Like when you go out into the world, you want to, you can have a great signature style, like what's Anna Wintour with her bangs, she does Vogue or something, or like certain things, it's the signature style. But if you start looking like you're in a costume, again, this is another like Project Runway reference, is like, you can't have things look too costumey. They need to have a style. And so I think with poetry, there is that similar of have your signature style, the things you do well, but make sure it's not too costumey or clunky or whatever the word is.
I love that distinction, particularly because I have seen that. I have seen people get costuming, and hopefully I won't let this out of my hands until I erase any of that, or at least balance it out with other styles. In fact, I produced a chapbook while I was on furlough or parole or whatever from that collection. I couldn't stand it anymore, and so I started writing poems about the future.
Oh, wow. Well, you're allowed to have bad drafts. Like our poems don't have to come out perfect. I mean, Elizabeth Bishop is like absolutely the queen of revision. I mean, her early drafts, some of them are cringy. There was one I remember reading about to like, I think it was a sick parrot she had, and if you go back and look at one art, it's so different from start to finish. Oh my God, T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland started out like when I was in Tom's bar or something. I mean, it was just all so we have to also allow ourselves that space to write messy and also to write a poem that may not ever go anywhere. Just like a poem. Like when I go back to the poems where I'm like, okay, Kelly, I have no idea what you're doing in this poem. That poem might have led to something else, or maybe there's a line in there that could become a title, or maybe it was just an exercise. Nobody complains to, I mean, you don't hear baseball players, they go out and they hit balls and they hit them and they hit them and they hit them. And sometimes they go over the stadium and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they miss them. But that's practice. And that's just it's a writing practice. It's not a writing perfect. I mean, that's not a thing, is it?
Well, at least I got a nice chapbook out of avoiding it for a while. Now I'm back to it. Now, I think it's Claire. It looks like Claire found that poem. Claire, if you want to, Bill may be able to pin you so that you can read the poem. So just let us somehow. What's that?
I would love that.
Kelly, do you want to read it?
No, I'd rather have you read it.
So, okay.
It's strange to read, right? Because
yes, that's what I'm thinking.
A Mad Lib.
So, would you encourage me to fill in the blanks with what's coming to my mind, or just say blank?
You read them blank.
Okay, okay.
It really is the poem. If anyone remembers a Mad Lib, it will say like noun. So, in a Mad Lib, and then you'd be we used to do these in the car on road trips, and you'd be like a noun, an adjective, a piece of clothing. And then you get like a funny little story at the end. So we did this poem, and you can actually go online and find this poem and use it to write your own poem. So that's how it works. But it is going to be kind of interesting to hear it read, because it looks much more like
I'll start reading it, and if you have feedback for me, you can jump in too. Mad Lib for when you're not writing. Inside the blank body part of the poem, there is an blank adjective jackpot. I play slot machines with blank emotion, and every poet with writer's block imagines Emily Dickinson's drawers full of blank noun instead of poems. She wasn't distracted and scrolling blank app or apprehension. She was blank verb with dragonflies. If she were here today, she'd blank mode of expression to the blank 2 words inside her mind. She'd say, it's okay to blank verb. So deep inside yourself, you forget about blank anything and are yourself forgotten. She'd say every jackpot outside your blank noun is a lie.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
Thank you. So have there been people, I was actually thinking that I should try to do that, fill in some of those blanks, but didn't you and Melissa actually write something where you did fill in the blanks on that?
I don't think so, but we write a lot of poems together. So I'm in a constant state of brain fog, so perhaps. But I know other people, when we shared it, then started sharing their own poems that they wrote from our poem Mad Lib, which was really fun. I hadn't realized it was gonna, I love the interactiveness of that.
Yes, yeah, God, I wish we could see some of those or hear some of those. I want to just, how are we doing for time? We're good. So I wrote down a couple of questions for myself. And So I wanted to ask you, what are some of your obsessions that maybe find themselves into your devotions, or what are some of them?
This book has a lot of desire in it and a lot of yearnings. My obsessions are, besides banana bread, which I love to have every morning, the environment for sure, kindness. What else am I'm Emily Dickinson has entered this book. So that was kind of a surprise for me. I wasn't planning on writing a book with so much Emily Dickinson. So she has been a little bit of an obsession with me lately, and reading her letters. I think just in general, poetry has always been an obsession, and paddleboarding is my other. I paddleboard as much as I can. So just kind of the quietness of being out on the water. Solitude is an obsession. Solitude and quiet. I feel really thankful to just get quiet time. You know, my life is, I'm able to do it because I can do a lot of my work remotely. And so I really appreciate that. I think those are some obsessions I have. Travel. I love to travel.
What is it between you and Jesus, I just blanked on her name. I was going to say between you and Elizabeth Bishop, but that.
You mean Emily Dickinson?
Sorry. I just somehow it was a senior moment. What is it between you and Emily Dickinson?
You know, I am not sure. I think because of all of the letters she was writing, you know, just the letter writing. I used to be a big letter writer. It's something that I feel like kind of the internet and phones and just my job as an editor being online, I've lost a lot of that, and I'm trying to get it back because that was a big part of my life. And so I've always loved that about her. I don't know how she ended up in this book. She was in my second book, which was called Letters from the Emily Dickinson Room, where I actually finished the book. There's a hotel in Nye Beach, Oregon, and it's called the Sylvia Beach Hotel, and each room is decorated after an author. And so I stayed in the Emily Dickinson room, and that was how I finished my book. And so she's always been somewhat of a muse for me. You know, I've always felt mindfully more connected with Plath and kind of the darker side. But I think, you know, Emily writes a lot about death, and she's actually funny. I mean, it's that there's humor in her work too. I don't know. I don't know why she's here, but you know, when a poet arrives in your dreams or knocks on your door, you let him in. A dead poet, not any random poet, but dead poets, if they are knocking on your doors or entering dreams, then you write about them.
So, letters. You really like letter writing. Have you written any letter poems?
Yeah, the whole second part of Letters from the Emily Dickinson Room are letter poems. But I do love me a good letter poem. I'm much more of a postcard girl now. And I do feel like that's just been the busyness of my work. But I was, you know, I miss having a pen pal. I mean, there was times where we had pen pals as a kid, and you just waited for the mail to come.
Mm-hmm.
But I do love a good letter poem too, and a good postcard poem.
Well, do you have one nearby that you might want to read for us?
Yeah, let me grab my book. Okay, so this is Letters from the Emily Dickinson Room. There's one, and I like this book because I alphabetized it. And that's the best thing you can ever do, is alphabetize the titles of your poems, because you can always find your poems because they're just perfectly in alphabetical order. So I have several letters, but then this one kind of makes me laugh because it's a memo because I was so busy that instead of writing a letter, I wrote a memo. But I think I'm going to read this one because right next to it, and it's Letter to Walt Whitman, who painted butterflies. Now, if you go to the Library of Congress, there are these beautiful paper butterflies that Walt Whitman painted. And there's a very famous picture of him like holding a butterfly on his finger. He was like a very good promoter. That was not a real butterfly. That was one of his paper butterflies on his hand, but kind of gave that sense of like, oh, look, he talks to nature. And this poem was written in response to that in 1942, Whitman's handmade cardboard butterfly disappeared from the Library of Congress. It was found in a New York attic in 1995. So that's kind of what inspired this poem. And if anyone gets a chance, Google Walt Whitman paper butterflies on the Library of Congress. They're to me, they just, I don't know, they just warm me. I just love them. Letter to Walt Whitman, who painted butterflies. Perhaps you made them as a child, cardboard butterflies lining your shelves, hiding in the pockets of the wool pants you wore only to church. Maybe you would wake early to cut cardboard into small waves, forming wings, antennae appearing like exclamation points. Words fluttered from your pen, cardboard wings dipped in red paint, holding patterns of words, the quiet swirl of wind. Maybe there are thousands of your butterflies still lingering in attics, your secret world of paper insects still hanging by threads.
I love that.
Thank
I
you.
wonder what he'd write back.
I don't know. Maybe I'll ask him in a dream. You can do that, you know. You can ask poets a question and sometimes they'll come and give you the answer.
Do those find their way into your poems?
Sometimes there have been, I have had a few like dream poems or things that have come to me in poems. Once a poem came to me during Shavasana, which you're supposed to, in yoga, where you're supposed to be, in corpse pose and not be thinking of anything. But it was definitely a moment where I just wanted it to end so I could write down the line to a poem.
So wait, so you do run over and write the line down?
No, I am somebody who does not want to get noticed. So I stayed in Shavasana till the class was ended and then ran into the locker room and wrote it on something.
But well, it must have been a job to not forget it.
I will run a line through my head over and over again. At night, that's the only time I make sure to write it down because I will have brilliant things in the middle of the night. Brilliant. Sometimes I look at what I've written down and I'm like, that is not brilliance. That is somebody who is in a dream state who think they're writing something really wonderful. But there have been times where I felt like, oh, why didn't I write that down? So I always try to write it down when I can, but I've really gotten into the habit where if I have the line or the image, I will just continually repeat it in my head till I can get to a place or even try to come up with like, what are they, like a mnemonic or something that will help me then get back to that place because it's so easy to forget things.
Well, and for some reason I've kept telling myself when I'm really tired and a line comes to me, I'll remember this.
Of course, that's what we say.
I never think that enough times that you do that, that you learn, but sometimes you just don't want to have to get yourself awake enough.
I know. I keep a notebook by my bed, a pen and paper, and then in the shower I have something called Aqua Notes, which is waterproof paper, and then there's a pencil. So because that's the other place where poems come to me, or in the showers or lines, and so I have a pen and paper in there just in case.
Well, also when you're on the highway, when you're driving on the highway.
Yeah, I think it was Terrence Hayes who said something about like putting it in a voice message or a note. on your phone, it never occurred to me. I'm always running around looking for paper. And I've thought, oh my gosh, I could have just set it into my phone. But then I feel like sometimes if I do that, it just goes into the abyss. And I have to be mindful to pull it out. I think I still like pen to paper.
Yeah, but sometimes like you're walking down the street, you just
Yeah.
don't have it. But I just ended up pulling into the breakdown lane and writing until I didn't need to
Oh,
anymore.
that's good.
So another question, what do you find that people most don't get about your poems? Or, I was thinking about was your niece.
Oh,
I
the line about not having a knife and not knowing which vein to slice into.
Right. Do you find any people like moving away from you on the?
Yeah, it was funny. My family does have a sense of humor, but that was they're also like not poets. I don't know. I actually have no idea what anyone thinks of my poems or me or what they gather. I mean, the only two experiences I've had where was somebody was surprised what I looked at based on what they had been reading by me. And I had been called, and I actually think it's funny. So I don't take this like, because I write a lot about death and dark stuff, I've been called a blonde Morticia. And I actually adore Morticia. So that's fine. Go for it. But no, I have no idea. Honestly, I don't know if people are misinterpreting, because I mean, that's when people come to your poems, they're bringing their whole self, they're bringing their experiences. So they're going to, I actually had I thought this was a really beautiful experience where I was at a reading and I read a poem about an apple tree. And at the end of the reading, a woman came up to me and said, I was so moved by your poem about the miscarriage. And it wasn't a poem about a miscarriage. And I said, thank you. But what I realized was we each can bring our own, our own experiences and all of us to a poem. And so we're taking what we need out of it or what's meaningful to us. Sometimes we're even creating our own metaphors. But no, I have no idea. I never know what anyone thinks about me or my poems, or if they're getting it.
Unless they're writing a blurb or a review.
And then it's going to be positive, because that's what I've never had anyone write a nasty blurb. So it'd be funny to have on the back of your book. These poems are very, very sad and about death. Don't read them.
I don't remember. It might be Dean Rader who has written all these, I think, bios of himself for himself. I think that's what it is. That's kind of a cool thing to do too. There were some people who were in this series who would write bios for each other, and those were really pretty bizarre and wonderful.
But isn't that like, even when you were reading my bio, I'm like, oh my gosh, hearing all the like Harvard review and that, and I'm like, oh, it's so boring. Like, you're not getting really a sense of who I am. Like, it should say she's an avid hiker and paddleboarder and, wakes up and has banana bread in the morning and is usually 10 years behind on trends. Like, I just started watching Schitt's Creek. Who knew that was a funny show? So I've started it. I'm like on season 2. So, but I think those intros and bios are much more fun. And I have seen a lot of people writing the author bio poem. So like, that's kind of a new little thing.
So your most recent book is on Copper Canyon. It's called Dialogues with Rising Tides.
Yes.
If you had to write a blurb for that book, what would you say?
Oh gosh. I would say read read Kelly Russell Agodon's poems to feel less alone. That's what I would say about that book, because I really feel like that's for me the heart of the book. I don't know what else I would say.
Well, that's a pretty good.
You worked 7 years on that.
I think that's good. I mean, that's good ad for the book. And so for those of you out there or who are in Zoom, get that book and read it if you want to feel less alone. And by the way, that is one thing I think is powerful, though in a gentle way, about your poetry, is that there is so much universality and so much humanity, and there's all these kind of strands that people can grab hold of for themselves if one of those strands speaks particularly to them.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. I was thinking about Theodore Retke and what he told Carolyn Kaiser, and it was about our eccentricities and the things we do in our poems, where she was in a workshop and someone was criticizing her, and he stopped the student and said, that could become her signature style. I don't think he used that term, but that idea of our eccentricities. And when I was in grad school, I remember that my transitions, that I shouldn't make such big leaps. And that's what I do in my poems, because that's the way my mind works. Like, we can be talking about a spider, and then, I'm going to bring up, the Phantom Toll Booth, because in my mind, when I was a little girl reading Phantom Toll Booth, a spider ran by. It's all connected. I mean, my mind is very much a web. So if we're here, we're going up the web, and you don't know where you're going to end up. And so I do make big leaps in my poem with the belief that the reader is going to follow me, because I believe our readers are very smart. And as humans, we fill in the blanks and we see connections. And I know people are seeing connections in all of our poems that we don't see. And I think that's kind of the beauty of poetry, is when you go to a poem and you say, oh my gosh, or you say to the poet, did you know you did this? And they're like, no. But because so much of this, I feel, comes, I don't know, some of poetry to me feels very otherworldly, where I don't know where it came from or why. Like, when you write a poem and you're like, well, this was a gift. I feel like I had no part in this. I was just transcribing something and it just came through. Like my antenna picked up a signal and here we are. But that doesn't happen all the time. Yeah.
Those are the gifts that, it's kind of like you can't wait for them. It's like watching a watch pot, waiting for a watch pot to boil. They come when they come, and it's just, but those leaps for you, I mean, I was trained in Freud and the, associations and the associative mind, and actually in some of the psychotic disorders, we talk about loosening of associations. So it's like, how did they get from here to there? And that can just be poetry.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, and I think, don't you love a poem that starts in one place and ends in another? And they're like, when you get to the end of the poem, you're like, how did we get here? How did they do that? It feels like, it's like a magic trick. So those are kind of my favorite poems. I think Ellen Bass calls them like long arm poems. And she writes some where she'll start talking about something and then we're somewhere else. And I just love it. And the long arm poems are like just grabbing things in. Those, I find them so satisfying.
I did see one poem not too long ago that really killed me with how that was done. And I'm going to have to go and look, because I think it's possible it was yours. but I can't remember.
Well, tell me if it was.
Yes, I'm gonna look, see if hopefully I saved it somewhere, because it's just wonderful. In any case, do you have, it's time for us to wrap up, and this has been such a pleasure. Do you have anything that you wanna say, to the audience, whatever, to wrap us up?
Yeah, just thank you all for listening. Thank you for the readers who opened this. Hi, Sarah out there in New York land, at a Starbucks with no Wi-Fi. She started us out with Pennies from Heaven song, so I think of you. And just thank you all. I hope you all try to keep poetry in your life, whether you're waking up and reading it or writing your own poems or sharing your poems. I think it's just a wonderful way to exist in the world. And I think the world needs more poems and poets and poetry reading. So thank you, Nina, for hosting the series and all the behind the scenes people that you didn't see here.
Yeah, in fact, Al, do you want to come back in and
Al has left the building.
oh, okay. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank you too for winging it with us, and let's continue the conversation.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was a real treat for my evening, my Pacific Northwest evening.
Yes. All right. And I hope we'll see some of you who are new to the open mic, some of you in the audience. Hope we'll see you back next month. We're always here on the second Monday of the month. And I forgot to mention, and you're getting a lot of thank yous in the chat. And I do want to remind people that if you want to make a donation, which will go to Kelly, there is a link in, where is it, Bill?
It's in the chat.
Okay, it's in the chat. And the PayPal link goes to Al's Press, After Hours Press, but the money does go to the poet. So you'll be seeing that in the mail. Lots and lots and lots of money. This is poetry. Thank you for being with us. Good night.